Hello everybody, welcome to part 5. In this section I'm going to be showing you how I quickly box modeled this hair and unwrapped it, and then I'm going to be showing you the shader creation for this shine effect here using some camera and vector information. It'll be really easy though, so skip ahead past the modeling if you're just curious about this shine, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, I'm just going to quickly run through the creation of this hair. I tend to try and make my hair by hand, that way I can unwrap it and use my shine specular shader you'll see. Going at it with a traditional box modeling method, I added a plane and subdivided it, and I'm kind of just focusing on the core shapes and fitting them around the head. I've got this kind of like teardrop shape without a back face at the moment, and I'm just duplicating that shape and moving it around, trying to find a nice balance between the large shapes and the small shapes and kind of just build up the very basic structure of the hair. Try not to get too in the weeds about it, just focusing on big bulky shapes. At the end I'm going to be trying to have a variety of large, medium, and small shapes. So for now I'm kind of experimenting with how it would look. I have a hair shader on here that I will show you how to make in just a second, so try not to focus on that. You can see I got rid of it because it was a little distracting. I'm duplicating the shapes and just kind of like moving them around the head, trying not to get too precious about it, but just feeling out the larger forms. Here I'm creating the bulk of the hair down the back using a mirror modifier. In my process I had already made the dress before I moved on to the hair, so forgive the sudden jump here. But yeah, so I'm just doing the same thing. I'm just kind of taking those shapes and duplicating them around, trying to find a nice flow, trying to give it a nice layered look, imagining some smaller shapes to break up the general direction I've gone with the hair. And here I'm just box modeling a quick curl using a twisting, rotating on one of my planes to create it. I'm speeding through this part a little bit just because this is a lot of content and I want to keep this short, but the basic idea here is to use those basic shapes that you created in the beginning and experiment using a variety of sizes and shapes to keep it interesting, but trying to keep a directional flow in mind. And always backing out to kind of look at the larger picture. Wanted to throw in a quick bonus how to make eyelashes. Really simple. Just take the base shape of the eye and extrude outward so it follows the shape. Add a solidify and give it a general bit of curvature and extrude the eyelashes to a point just like this. Keep it really simple. I find that this is the most effective and easiest way to control those eyelashes. Okay, so the hair is done. This is obviously a little bit in the future, but I wanted to make a quick tutorial about how to achieve this type of specular anime style shine that follows the camera and moves dynamically as you move around it. It's super simple. I tried to simplify the logic as much as possible for even beginners to understand, so let's jump right in. Okay, so I'm going to give these two some fresh tutorial materials, and I'm going to go ahead and call this hair tutorial. I'm going to select these meshes, shift Control L, and link those materials so they all have the same material here. And then I'm going to go into my shader editor here, and I'm just going to check out what's in here. So we got our principled BSDF. So I'm going to add this diffuse BSDF, and then I'm going to add a shader to RGB node, and then I'm going to add a color ramp. I'm just going to plug that into base color. And what I'm basically doing here is I'm imitating a Toon shader setup while using the principled BSDF shader. So basically I'm just telling it to give me that information from this diffuse BSDF, convert that information into RGB data that can be read by this color ramp. Then I'm just basically going to set a dark color, and I'm going to set a light color. All right, from here, you're going to want to get Photoshop out. And I already did this, but you basically want to create a black rectangle, and you want to go into blur, motion blur, and you're just going to blur it like so. Save that as a JPEG and bring that in here. And so then you're going to want to add that image texture. And basically, once we plug that in, you can see exactly what's happening. Here's my picture on the plane, and that's not correct, so we're going to go ahead and invert that with this invert color node. Plug that into color and into base color, and then we can kind of see what's happening here. I've unwrapped these 3 hair strands. You can see their UVs over here. That'll be essential for this workflow, is having geo you can unwrap. And you can kind of visualize how the shine is going to take effect already. I'm going to go ahead and use a mix color. And I'm going to basically combine these 2 different nodes here to create an effect in the final shader here. So I'm going to take this node and I'm going to change this to add. So it's saying take this information and then add whatever information I plug into it on top, just like a Photoshop layer. I'm going to take this information and plug it into factor, which essentially acts like a mask. It's saying use this data as a mask for this color here. So now if you plug that into factor and this data into A, your original your original shader here will retain its color and it will add this data on top in whatever color you want. So that's sort of the shine color I'm going to go for. And you can see that this texture is repeating. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to extend so it doesn't do that. Okay, so that's the very basic logic of this shader. This is the most basic it can get. It doesn't follow the camera, but we're going to fix that. Okay, so anytime you want something to follow the camera, you're going to want to work with vectors. The way this works is you're going to get the vector information of the camera and convert it to world space data. So essentially we're telling Blender that we want the location data of the camera in its relation to the world, and we want to know that information as a coordinate, like an XYZ coordinate, so that way we can use that data to drive the location of this mask. So we basically need to be able to access that data. So we're going to tell the node that we want the X, Y, and Z information of that vector. And so we really only want the Z information because that's up and down, and we want this shine to follow our camera up and down. And so we're going to grab that Z, and then we're going to grab a mapping node. We're going to plug that into location because we want to drive the location of this texture based on the Z coordinate from this vector. And we're going to plug that into vector. And so right now you're not seeing anything, but that's because we're going to need more information. Blender doesn't quite understand what's going on, so we're going to need to tell it that we're using a UV map as well to drive this information. So to do that, we're going to add a texture coordinate. And there's a little UV tab here. If you plug that straight into vector, we're going to get the exact same result as before. It doesn't move with the camera, but it's telling Blender, hey, use the UV data and project this texture onto it using that. And then so we can control it like this, but not through the camera. So we're going to need a way to combine these two. We're going to do that with this mapping node. So basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to plug UV into vector. We're going to keep separate XYZ in location. And then we're going to want to plug this vector into vector. And from there, now we can get this movement with the camera, but it's kind of all over the place because we don't have any boundaries. It's kind of just going all over. It needs to be restricted to one axis here. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to grab, combine XYZ, and we're just going to want this Y location. And we're going to plug this one into location. Now we've told our program that we only want the Y axis of the UV, and that way it stays going up and down like so. And if you want to be able to move the location of your shiny without having to go into your texture, what you can do is add a vector math node and plug that in here. And this node will basically tell Blender that we have this data, now add this number to it. So this is moving it on the X by a certain value, and this value is moving it on the Y. So now we can move the location of our shine procedurally. And if you think that shine is moving too fast, we can just add a map range node. And if we plug this value the Z value into value and the result into Y here. Now we can basically remap the 0 to 1 values that are driving this logic. And if we change this to min to max number, we can adjust how quickly the shine will dance across the hair. So if we make this a smaller number, it goes less. But if we make this a higher number, it'll move much faster. And if you want your shine to have a sharper edge here, you can add a color ramp right here. And this will basically tighten that edge. You can also use this to make it smaller. And if you decide you want some other kind of texture, here's one I made that just has these rectangles taken out for a more interesting pattern. You can just plug in a new value here, or use math to subtract it, either way. And there you have it. This is the very simplest version of this shader I could come up with that still follows the logic of using the camera vector. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, please let me know. And I can't wait to see what you guys make. All right, thanks guys.
Ah! Oh! Oh!